Welcome to the Collaboration Conversation, a listener-supported video podcast where Christian artists, entrepreneurs, and friends share about their upcoming projects and how they are using the gifts and talents that God has given them. This podcast is made possible through generous listeners and friends like you, and we are so very grateful to our supporters. We also want to say a special thank you to the Ryman Auditorium for supporting Project Brickworks. For ticket and show information, head over to ryman.com. If you would like to sponsor an episode, head over to the collaborationconversation.org and click sponsor an episode. Likewise, if you want to check out or support our nonprofit ministry, head over to projectbrickworks.org. Today, our very special guest is John Grooters. John is a director, writer, and film producer. We got to hear him speak at the Christian Worldview Film Festival, which was incredible.
Yes.
And it was so inspiring that immediately my mom was like, I'm going to go ask him. And I was like, do it. And so she was bold and she stepped out in faith and he said yes. So here we are today, John. Thank you so much for being here with us. It's nice to meet you.
Yeah, my pleasure. I'm glad to be here.
Well, so we oftentimes have guests that we know, folks in our world, or filmmakers that we've worked with, but we don't know your story, and so we'd love to hear, a little bit about you, your work there in Holland, Michigan. If you'll just tell us and our listeners a little bit about you.
A little bit about me. Wow. My wife and I started this company 20 years ago. We just had our 20-year anniversary. So for the last 20 years, we've launched a little production company. So over those 20 years, I never knew really from week to week if we would be alive, the next month. That's just the way this job goes.
True.
But from the beginning, we decided to have a mission. And, business people back 20 years ago were big in mission statements. I don't know if they still are. So we said this was going to be our mission, to reveal the beauty of Christ to the world through excellent media. And it was a sentence that we thought lived up to what our dreams were. To reveal, because the beauty is already there. We don't have to pound it into people or scream at anybody. Just reveal the beauty of Christ to the world. We didn't want to keep this restricted in any way to our local city, state, country, hemisphere, nothing.
Sure.
Through excellent media. And so our desire has always been excellence, and we pursue that over profit or over anything else. It's just our desire to get better at what we do and assemble in a team that works well together. So we're a team here, which is a little bit unusual in what is basically a freelance industry.
Oh, yeah.
And but so we're sort of we've got about 16, 17 people here that do different parts of production and have their specialties. Our audio department, our programming department, our app and web development team, production people, graphics, editorial, special effects, all these kinds of things. So we kind of work together, and we do we take clients. Like, not every job we're doing is Christian films. We're working for trucking companies and whomever.
Okay.
But I see all that as participating in the mission. I mean, it's the jobs we've had from our long-standing clients that have helped us to sustain and build and grow our team and our gear, that then when we get opportunities to do feature films like Sabina, we're ready for it. And we can finish a lot of the pieces, in the building here, and we can do a lot of the stuff with the team we have, of course, joining then with other teams. So we've built this little company, and God has sustained us, and He has given us this chance to sort of fulfill that mission, now looking backwards over 20 years in some really beautiful ways for us. So we've had chances to work with some of what we think are the greatest ministries in the world and come alongside them. So, we've done like 80 episodes with Ray Vanderlaan for the Focus on the Family series, and we've been all through every area where the Bible, from Israel to Greece to Egypt to the Sinai Desert to Jordan. And we've done these episodes in those places and helped Ray teach the Bible. And we've come alongside Answers in Genesis when they opened the Creation Museum. 2007, we did 50 films for that museum, and we had to help that minute. We came alongside them and did entertainment things for them, and for the Ark Encounter when that opened. And I mean, there's a lot. It's a long list because after 20 years, but we've got a chance to come alongside some wonderful ministries.
That's amazing.
And then we've got a chance to do some of our own projects. So, as we have the opportunity to move into the feature film realm, is kind of sort of my favorite place to play, and every chance we've gotten to do features, we've jumped at it. And you pour so much of your life. Everyone has their specialties. What I do is I write, I direct, and I edit. And more I've started handing off the other pieces that by necessity I've done over the years. But now, if I can focus on my wife, Judy, she really produces, and she both produces the films, and she also runs the app and web team. She's kind of multi-talented.
Wow.
And, I let her, have her realm. And, I used to do a lot in the audio, but, I've got a great audio team, so I really let them. But writing and directing and editing, that's a lot of influence over a picture.
I was just going to say that, yeah.
And it's rare to get that privilege. I don't expect, that to always be given the privilege to do those three elements. But when I have gotten that opportunity to do those three elements, it's a pretty deep dive into that project. You're deeply invested in it, and you have a sense of clarity about who the characters are and what the story flow is, and then given the chance to really try to craft that into the screenplay, so that every act, every scene has a purpose and has a flow, emotional flow from positive to negative and then back and forth. That none of the scenes are just sort of expository writing garbage. So you work hard to get your screenplay, and then from there, of course, you make the movie, and that's a whole other process. But directing a film is not just the days on set. It's the pre-production, it's location scouting, it's casting, it's working with the art departments and the wardrobe departments. But again, because I have had the privilege of being both the writer and the director, I can kind of keep a consistent, clear leadership for that.
Yeah.
So we don't waste a lot of time running off on tangents, for better or worse. I won't necessarily claim that's good. But it also gives the chance to give the artists that you hire that they know where they can bring value, because we show them where we're going. And then, of course, you said you're an editor, Sarah. You know that once you dive into that edit, now
it's
the whole
like
rhythm
writing
of the film.
Yeah, it's like writing the film for a second time.
Absolutely, which is why I don't want anyone else to do it.
I don't blame you. You have a really sick gig going on over there.
And it's time consuming. Boy, editorial is one of those jobs, and there's a lot of jobs, but editorial is a thing where you can't see all the time that has been put into it, because most of the time has been throwing things away, and it's a art of knowing what to throw away.
Totally.
So you don't know how many hours have been spent to chisel it down to the length that it is, and to try to get the rhythm and the pacing where you want it to be. So those are my things. We're thankful and we're blessed to still be working with the team here, and we love what we're doing, and we're hungry for more.
I was going to ask you, the guy that I work for who makes movies and then has me edit them, he and I had this really great conversation. This is super off script, sorry, but I'm just so interested to hear your point of view on this. We were talking about how I'm going to take a break in 2 years, and he was like, so about that, he was like, you can take it, but can we consult? Because he feels like, as the director, he is, and cinematographer, he is so invested in specific scenes and how much blood, sweat, and tears went into making happen what happened visually and conceptually, and but when he gets into a room with me, I'm like, yeah, you don't need that. I'm helping him cut through this and cull through it, and I'm like, you don't need that shot. And he's like, you don't know how long it took me. So anyway, all that to be said is I'm very romantic about my work. He's very romantic about his work. How do you, as the writer who writes a scene that potentially needs to end up on the floor, how are you able to separate that romanticism of your work with what needs to get done and how the final film needs to end up?
You absolutely know of what you speak. I went to college and learned this, but then I was really mentored by a guy named Jack Hannock in New York City, and for years I would go to New York to edit projects with Jack. Back in the days of 2-inch reel-to-reel tape and big, you had to do your dissolves with lining. It was a different world. It was pre-digital and pre-nonlinear. So I wasn't, smooth on running some of those larger consoles, so I'd go in with my rough edits, and Jack would work. And I remember asking him, all right, you've worked a number of projects with me. I'm editing more and more. What's the one piece of advice that you would give me as an editor? And Jack was one of New York's finest. And he said, yeah, John, if you shot the thing, take your favorite shot and throw it away.
Oh, no. Oh, gosh.
Says you've lost your mind. I got up at 4 a.m. I hiked to the mountain to get in position for that sunrise, and the goat walked right in front of me as the sun crested the thing, and then an eagle came from heaven. That shot's amazing. He said, yeah, throw it away. Until you can throw it away, you're not an editor.
Yeah.
Oh.
But you know what he's talking about, don't you, Sarah? Like, there is this dispassionate coldness in the editing room. It doesn't matter if it took you 10 days to shoot that shot and you had a helium balloon that flew down from the moon.
Right.
If it doesn't support the story, you throw it away.
You got to get rid of it.
I can't do it. I'm not telling you I've ever learned that lesson.
But I heard it somewhere. Someone told it to me one time.
I put it in 3 times because I love it so much.
That's funny.
Documentary kind of work, that's when you're kind of hustling for these shots. Film work or animation work can be a little different. And maybe what I talk about when people ask me, some directors, most directors have a specific talent that's kind of their leading edge. And I'm so jealous of the great artists who are great directors. There are some of these directors who can really draw. Ridley Scott is a fantastic artist, for example. And so he can create beautiful scenes and sketch them. If I sketch a scene, you wonder if it's an ancient language. Is that Phoenician, or is that supposed to look like a dock with a boat behind it? I wish I'd learned to draw. But because I've been editing since the Avid was invented, so that's just kind of the thing. So as a director, what I'm doing, and as sort of I do a lot of voice work, my thing is I pre-produce the whole movie, and then I constantly re-edit it the whole time. Because of that, and because our budgets, our whole goal is to maximize a budget as far as it can be maximized. That excellence word crops up all the time.
Yeah. And
there's just no way around. It's expensive. Every day you're on set shooting. It's sometimes you've got 100 people that you're housing and feeding, and it's just expensive. And so the way to sort of save money on a film isn't to just nickel and dime here and there. It's to shoot less days. The days are the most expensive commodity that you have.
Yeah.
So maybe you can't spend this amount for this or that piece of gear or this actor, but really the days are. So anyway, because of that, we work super hard to really, really prep our days as efficiently as possible. And that means I don't have to take a take longer than I need to take it or shorter than I need to take it. So ironically, Sarah, as an editor, I have very, very little waste.
That's
there
awesome.
will not be a scene that gets thrown away because I've already edited it out.
Yeah.
I've already edited it out in the pre-pro.
That's so
So
smart.
it's more about getting the scene to work properly. It doesn't always work the way I had pre-envisioned it, that's for sure. Sometimes that's a little bit boring. That's a little bit predictable. And so sometimes you've got to play with it. But man, the cutting room floor scenes in my films makes for a very short film.
That's excellent. And that's a killer tip to any filmmakers who are listening, is to do that, especially if you can and you have the time and the resources to do that post work in pre. Oh my gosh, that's incredible to do all of that planning. Mike is my boss. We've talked about trying to do this pre-editing ahead of time, and I think it's going to take it to the next level, and hopefully my cutting room floor will be a lot less full as well. I wanted to ask you about, so your wife, you mentioned, is a producer, and she produces your films. Take me back to the beginning, though, when you started the production company, because I have lived in this freelance world for a very long time. You're not wrong. It's a total freelance industry. How did you guys decide to start the production company? Take me back to that and kind of how you guys got started. Well, the first thing is she had a very lucrative career as a consultant that was going just fine before I asked her to help me with this company and ruin everything she had going. That's hilarious.
But it's kind of her fault. And so far as that, she's the one who encouraged me to do this. I had gotten a job right out of college. So right out of college, I got a great job with a church denomination, one of the oldest church denominations in the country. Boss was in New York City, and I was in Michigan, so the boss wasn't looking over my shoulder, which is something that I appreciate. And I wasn't very good at what I did, but they let me do it anyway. And I would do a lot of travel. And literally when I started, it was slideshows, right? A lot of photography and multi-projector slideshows with soundtracks. And then it became video. And so I spent 15 years at that company doing that job. And I'm so grateful for it now. Because like I said earlier, in New York, I got to rub shoulders with some of the best camera operators and editors that I wouldn't have met in Michigan. It was just a different talent level here. Like if they're working in New York back in those days, they wouldn't still be working if they weren't good. The competition for those jobs was so high. So if you were making it in the city as an editor or as a DP or as a camera op, you were pretty good, and it was a tough world, and it toughened me up, and I got beat up a number of times, but it was great. But I felt released from that. Right after 15, 16 years, it was absolutely clear, even though everything was fine, this wasn't what I was going to spend my whole life doing. And I just thought I better get another job at another production company and just, make it pay. We had kids and the rest. But Judy said, why don't you start it? And so it was her encouragement. And, we started with with no furniture. We rented a building, and I remember rolling in one desk, and one chair. Like, this doesn't look very impressive. I did kind of work out a deal because they were closing so I started with I bought out all the gear that I'd been working with, which helped. It was an Avid at that time, and then a good camera, and so I had some microphones, actually this microphone. So we had some gear, had 2 employees. I brought on an assistant editor and a front office, so there's 2 paychecks, and we didn't have any way to pay them week 1. I didn't tell them that. But yeah, you guys come work for me, and it'll be great, and here's your salaries, and we'll be fine. How are we going to... So we prayed about this, and this is going to sound like I'm making this up, because we had promise of continuing work from the clients I'd already been serving.
Sure.
We'll still hire you. You know what? Not one of those things ever happened. Like, everything you thought was the kind of the safety net, for some reason, none of that happened. But here's what did happen. We opened on a Monday, September 1st, 2001, on Monday, and a client that I'd never met from a contact friend of mine that hadn't told me we would do this worked out a meeting that day, and by the end of Monday, I had a $90,000 job and a $30,000 deposit check in my hand.
Boom.
For a fantastic project that I did not know about on Sunday.
Oh,
but on Monday,
gosh.
I got the phone call, hey, would you talk to these guys? They'd been looking for somebody. We met, if you guys can do this, we'll do it. Anyway, that was the Lord, man, because week 1, there was your payroll, there was your rent. And that was day 1.
He is so good. Holy cow, yeah.
That's awesome. That's amazing.
Since then, one of the lessons that we've shot with Ray Vanderlaan in the Sinai was when Moses is leading the 40-year wilderness journey and God is providing bread from heaven, they would get manna for one day, right? And it was a hard and fast rule: don't store it up for tomorrow. You don't, and one guy tried, and that was not a good decision for him, as he was buried in the earth. But the idea is God is intending for us to live in this dynamic, daily, interactive relationship. So it's actually nothing to bemoan the fact that you are almost, I don't want to say there's nothing right about planning. Of course, that's not my point, but what he says is Israel, when you go into the land I'm going to give you, and you live in houses you didn't build, and you drink from cisterns you didn't dig, you will forget about me. And that's a deep warning, deep warning. So if we would ever get discouraged because we didn't have the next 12 months planned out, or we didn't have a guarantee to, what we're going to do, hey, did I not provide manna for you yesterday?
Yeah.
Right.
Did I not provide manna for you the day before? In fact, have you gone a day your whole stinking life where I haven't provided? So why are you worried about today?
Yes.
And we just have had the privilege of living into that reality, not because of our great spiritual depth, but because that's just the way it works.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, my gosh.
That's awesome.
And to this day, I'll say we're dependent on him for staying alive tomorrow, but it's been an incredibly fun journey, and here we are, 20 years in.
Love that. Amen. It reminds me of someone. I wish I could tell you who told me this, but it doesn't say it does say give us this day our daily bread, not give me the bread for the next 12 months. Pretty please.
And I got a bit of a problem with that Lord's Prayer verse, because now I'm doing this thing called keto, and we're not allowed to eat bread. And I'm like, this is not even biblical. Why would we do this?
It tells me to give me bread.
That's funny.
Right. Yeah.
Well,
that's funny.
One of the things that you mentioned when we met was that you had a podcast, and I don't know why. I guess it's because now we've jumped in.
Podcasting. Yeah.
Even though we don't really consider ourselves podcasters,
We don't.
we don't know what we're doing most of the time. But I would just love to hear about yours.
Well, we started a podcast called No Shame, and it was at the intersection of faith and culture. And the team here thought it would be good for us to just start having conversations with writers and actors and athletes and authors and just anybody who was sort of, in one way or another, a cultural influencer or a tastemaker or a voice, who also carried the mantle, and have conversations. And we weren't videoing them; we were just doing the audio podcasts. And so I said, sure. I mean, like talking with you guys. I mean, I love to talk with people. This is what is fun, and to meet interesting people. So I certainly enjoyed. We did 108 episodes, and then I haven't done it for a year now. It's really been about 1 year almost to the day. And it wasn't really some huge decision like, let's cancel the podcast. It was just I had a trip to Uganda, and then I had a trip to Northern Ireland, and then I had a trip to Romania, and then I had another trip to Uganda, and then it just got busy. We were finishing a film, and then COVID shut the world down, and so we sort of just have taken a bit of a pause on the No Shame podcast. They're still all out there on my website, which is johngrooters.com, and you can listen to any of them. I had some favorites. I'm sure you guys do too, but I'm a sports fan, and so every once in a while they'd give me athletes. And I love talking with the athletes. I mean, off the top of my head, I knew their stats. So when an athlete would come on, you're talking in my sweet spot at that point.
Yeah.
And I had some on that I really enjoyed.
Who were your favorites?
I enjoyed all of them.
Who were your favorite athletes?
Well, I'll tell you one. Van Beesbrook, what's his first name? Mike Van Beesbrook was a goalie, played for the New York Rangers.
Okay.
And he was probably the best American goaltender, American Olympian. And when the expansion draft came on, the Florida Panthers took Mike Van Beesbrook as their first. He was the first player picked to go on the expansion team. And he told me the story of how he was kind of bummed, man. He's going from the New York Rangers, where he's like the man in the city, to some expansion team playing in Miami. Who cares about hockey in Miami?
Right.
And he was just down, right, and depressed. And he said his marriage is on the rocks, and he was just drinking, and he wasn't a man of faith, and he wasn't interested in faith. But there was a chaplain on the team that asked him out to breakfast one morning. And Mike says, I didn't want to go. I didn't want to listen to what he said. And somehow, God bless, this chaplain got through to him. And before they left that IHOP or wherever they were, Mike was in a state of repentance, like, I really want to be in the Father's house. And
praise God.
And he starts to think about his wife is going to not like this, and he doesn't know how to tell her this.
Oh, no.
So he gets home that day, and he walks in the door, and he's anxious, and his wife says, Mike, we got to talk. I need to talk to you about something. And he's like, well, okay. She says, sit down on the bed. And he's like, oh, boy. He thinks he knows what's coming. And she says to him, you need to know that today I turned my life over to Jesus Christ.
Oh.
She says, and things need to be different between us.
I just got chills.
And he said, today I turned my life over to Jesus Christ.
Oh, wow.
He's now the head of USA Hockey. He's a chiseled, great, strong dude. But that story melted me.
Oh my gosh. That is
And he's
incredible.
the kind of guy that doesn't make up stories, right? Like he's not a storyteller. He's
That is
awesome.
so cool. Well, that story is way cooler than what I was going to say. But you just said you're a big sports fan, and I was going to tell you one of our favorite episodes. We had a Major League Baseball umpire on, and getting to talk to him about where he's been and how the process works. Anyway, we're big baseball fans, and so that was pretty special for us. We also love sports, so.
Well, we can riff on this, Sarah. I'll go. So I'm old, but I was watching the World Series when it was mid-'70s, and it was the Reds and the Red Sox.
Okay.
1975. And there was Game 6, and at that time, 80 million people would watch the World Series. Now maybe 10 do. But back in those days, the World Series was a big outfit. And the Red Sox were down, and a guy named Bernie Carbo comes up in extra innings off the bench, and he's facing the best relief pitcher, and he smacks the game-winning home run. So for a day, Bernie Carbo was the biggest name in the world of baseball. And I had him on the podcast, and he told me how that day he went home to his hotel room and strung out on drugs and was miserable.
Oh.
And he's one of these guys that at that time didn't know the Lord at all, was a slave to different kinds of intoxicants. And, man, you talk about a guy who can speak with firsthand knowledge of the fact that the mountaintop is nowhere to be alone. He was on the mountaintop. I mean, I would have given my right arm to have a career and be the baseball hero that Bernie Carbo was. But in his words, man, it was meaningless and empty. And he is outspoken now about his faith. It's a long time ago, granted, but I was watching that game, working at a boys' club in a little black and white TV, and so I knew exactly where we were, and I could still riff with him.
That's amazing.
That was a good one.
Were you a Red Sox fan or a Reds fan that year?
Well, I was a Dodger fan. I grew up in Arizona, and so we didn't have a team back then. So the LA Dodgers back in the Ron Garvey and Ron Say, and those were my teams. So the Reds were the number one hated
true.
enemies.
Yeah.
I was a fan of anybody playing against the Reds, who were so good.
That's how we feel about Alabama.
Well,
why do we root against the best teams ever?
I hate them.
that's funny because we went from living near Cincinnati to LA.
Yes.
So we went from being Reds fans to trying to be Dodgers fans. It didn't work. We ended up with the Angels.
We became Angels fans instead.
We just couldn't root for the Dodgers.
The happy
Yeah,
medium.
loyalty is a tough thing to chisel out of you.
Oh my gosh, yes. That's so funny.
Well, so let's talk about your films. I remember Tortured for Christ was at the Christian Worldview Film Festival in 2000, I don't remember, 17. That was my first time at the Christian Worldview Film Festival because Fat Chance was playing.
Yeah.
And so I remember seeing all about it, and this year with Sabina at the Christian Worldview Film Festival. So tell us about kind of these latest films that you've created.
Yeah. Oh my goodness, it's been an incredible privilege. So Tortured for Christ, Richard and Sabina Wormbrand, right, were Christians living in Romania, and they ended up, suffering really a number of times under first the Nazis and then later when the communists took over Romania. So Richard was in prison for 14 years, and in a communist prison, it's not just like you're taken off the streets to keep you from getting in trouble. It's that you're now in an indoctrination camp, and you're brutally tortured on a daily basis. It's disgusting and satanic what they do and what the communist prisons did to people. And his wife also spent 3 years in prisons of her own. And all this was only for being Christians. It wasn't because of anything they did.
Oh, my gosh.
And the story is the story. But what happened was eventually they did survive by a miracle of God, and they were ransomed, and they got out of the country. And so when they made it to California in the 60s, Richard wrote a little book by hand in 3 days called Tortured for Christ. And he just sort of spilled onto the pages. He would say it was not a very good book. It wasn't very well structured. But somehow it got published, and it just was the first story that had come out from behind the Iron Curtain of what life in prison was like. And he's brutally honest in this book, brutally honest. It's an easy read, and it's short. And it just became a bestseller. I mean, Tortured for Christ, a lot of your fathers might have read it, or people have heard of it.
Oh, yeah.
In Romania, it was banned. All his books were banned. But that book was released in 1967. So the ministry that he eventually founded, which is called the Voice of the Martyrs, has been in ministry a long time, and for their 50-year anniversary of the publication of that book, they kind of made the decision we should do like a docudrama of some kind about Richard and his story. And we threw our hat in the ring as one of the possible people that they would engage to do the film. And by God's grace, we got the job.
Yeah.
And I got the job. And so I wrote the screenplay, and at that time I collaborated with some people from VOM, and I really didn't know actually what a docudrama was, because it can be almost anything. And I didn't want interviews and recreations, so I kind of just went all for it and just did a movie. And so we just did a movie called Tortured for Christ. And in that process, boy, did I get inspired, because Richard and Sabina are exemplary people who find a way, even in the worst situations, to reflect the love of God, and who just were indefatigable in their efforts to bring the kingdom wherever they were. So if they're in the worst possible place, Richard's going to bring the kingdom. And through his suffering and his pain, he also saw, he says, the supernatural became the natural.
Wow.
There's something about the hand of God that was active in those prisons that he describes that he kind of missed the rest of his life. Like, yeah, he didn't love, not having to stand in a carcer for 2 days with nails punching into his body, but he missed some of that vibrancy of God.
Yeah.
So Tortured for Christ was made. I'd encourage anybody to watch it. It's a powerful story, and it's available, I believe, on Amazon Prime, and it's out there. So that movie was a lot of fun to make, and I quickly realized we're going to have to film this in his own country with accents of his own people, and so that was an early decision. All right, we're going to put this all where it happened, and as a result, we ended up in the real prisons where he was held and in the real streets where that stuff happened. So the authenticity was just off the charts. God brought to us some fantastic actors, and so Emil Mondenach, who plays Richard, is as fine as an actor as there is in the world, in my opinion.
Wow.
And so great cast, great location, great story. It came together, and it's inspiring. We finished that movie, and it's gone all over the world, multiple languages, and it's powerful. And I said to I said, we really need to do another movie, though, because there's one problem, and the problem is, how did they become those people?
Yeah.
Because were they born that way? I literally said, were they born of virgins? Because I don't know anybody who can do love the enemy the way they did. Were they born with a silver spoon in their mouth? Because, anyway, so I looked into their pre-story, their deeper history. And the story is, no, they weren't born of virgins. In fact, they were anything but Christians when they met. They were completely apart from the Lord, totally hedonistic, very secular, very unfaithful. Man, it's a long arc from who they were, very successful and smart. They're both very incredibly smart people and had a lot of talent. So Sabina, Tortured for Christ, the Nazi years, is our chance to do the prequel. We shot it, secondary, but it's the prequel. And it does take us now on a journey where, to me, in some ways, all of us have an on-ramp to that story, because anybody can find themselves somewhere on the spectrum, from total atheists or agnostics or secularists to maybe exploring, wouldn't it be great, if there, Richard says at one point, a universe with no creator cannot compare to the thought of a God who speaks and listens. Now, he's not a believer at that point, but he's smart enough to go, if given a choice between a cold, empty, meaningless existence or a God who speaks and listens, that would be better.
Yeah.
Who would disagree with that?
Right.
That's part of his journey. And as he explores these things after being struck with a very serious illness, he comes to Christ, and his wife is disgusted with him. In fact, the day he's going to be baptized, she decides to kill herself, saying, if we couldn't have the life I wanted, then we wouldn't have life at all. Now, that's a long way from the combination of Mother Teresa and Billy Graham, which is who I think of her as, who she becomes.
Right.
So Sabina is an incredible story with a lot of subplots and other arcs that go into it. But Voice of the Martyrs was super gracious and said, yeah, let's do it. We want you to do another one.
Wow.
And so back to Romania, back with Emo Mondanac and Raluca Botez, so the same actors who now have to look 10 years younger, even though we're shooting it 4 years later. God bless them.
We love a good makeup department.
Yeah, the good makeup department.
Oh, wow.
Every trick in the lens book we could do.
Yeah.
But they're fantastic. They're just fantastic. And so that's Sabina, and it did a theatrical run in November of about 850 theaters. It's going to be free downloads for 3 days in March, coming up like the 3rd, 4th, and 5th. That VOM. I don't distribute the film. Voice of the Martyrs distributes the film. So once the film is done, my day is done.
Yeah.
But you can watch
Lucky.
it. SabinaMovie.com. Yeah, it's not how it always is, of course. But in this case, SabinaMovie.com, and you can see it very soon. And then it'll be for sale and all the rest.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Oh my gosh, that's so
awesome.
cool. Well, tell us, we got to share a little bit with you about our ministry before we started. But for those listeners who maybe this is their first time listening, because we have you on, we believe that we are all given gifts and talents by our Heavenly Father to use in the good works that He has set out for us to build our brick in collaboration with Him as He builds His kingdom. And we think sometimes our guests get a little anxious and nervous about talking about their talents and gifts. They feel like it's a little bit self-serving, but we always want to invite them to do it to give God the glory and the honor for it. It's not a look at me, look what I can do. It's a look how good my Father is.
Yeah.
And so anyway, I just want to open that invitation to you to share with us and our listeners what you think your talents and gifts are that He's given you and how you've used them throughout the years.
Well, I'll tell you one story. I've been in music all my life, and kind of Christian rock band circuits and all that, and started young, and learned a trick early on. And this is actually helpful. And so before I would go out on a stage to play, even if it was just at my dad's church, before you'd walk up and be responsible, I used to pray this prayer: okay, Lord, this was intended to be for you. Therefore, if I really suck and blow this, then you lose.
Oh my gosh.
It sort of took the pressure off.
That's awesome.
That's a fairly immature theology, I might confess to, but that really kind of helped me. Like, all right, I'm doing this for the Lord. I can't blow it. This isn't for self-aggrandizement. then years in music with Dwight Beale as Grooters and Beale and partner, we learned in the most practical ways. Like, this again is not spiritual insight. This is just practical. We would remember to pray before a weekend event or a camp that we'd play at, or when we were kind of prayerful about it. Man, it always went well, and things would work. And sometimes, not because we were like really backsliding, we just forgot, or we just got a little bit into ourselves or whatever. And we tried to do, and inevitably, the sound system would blow up, and the lightning would hit. I mean, whatever.
Yep.
I mean, I'm exaggerating, but so that's one thing. It's just like when you pray about something. One, the pressure comes off your back a little bit, and two, God actually helps you.
Yeah.
For some way, things just go a little better. Relationships don't get in the way of what you're trying to do, because in our own strength, we can really find ways to divide with people. I mean, your wife can be the first one. Your partner can be this, your musical band, and then the client. You can find yourself at odds with everybody. If you're in the Word, if you're sincerely trying to pray for the humility that comes only from Christ, if you're saying, I'm trying to be planted in good soil here, Lord. I don't want to be the soil that's shallow. I don't want to be the soil that's choked out by ambition. I want to be good soil because I want to return not 30, not 60, but 100-fold of a yield.
Yeah.
So that kind of a thing will change the way you approach a project. And I'm still working on this, by the way. Don't think I'm preaching like I got this figured out. But I'm working on this. I'm speaking this out loud so I will continue to pay attention.
Yeah.
We want to return a fruitful yield. That's the goal, not selfishness, not pride.
Yeah.
Because, if the Bible says the deadliest of sins is pride, that's pretty dangerous.
Yeah.
So conversely, probably the most blessed of attributes is humility.
Yes.
Well, we're in a public industry, music and movies. What we do, we have to sort of be public about it. So we have to be careful. I mean, when Jesus says it's harder to the disciples, they're arguing about who's going to be the greatest.
Yes.
Which they're doing a lot. So we can take heart that the disciples themselves struggled with what we struggled with.
We're in good company.
It's harder for a camel to go through that of a needle, after the rich man comes to him with sale. It's not easy to be in a public role that those of us that have some talents and gifts in those things, whether we're speakers or writers or musicians or artists or directors or actors or whatever it might be, we're going to be public. And if we're good at it, we're going to want and we're going to need and we're going to feed on good feedback. There's nothing wrong with wanting to be excellent at what we do. But we're doing it for the Lord.
Right.
That's the difference.
Amen.
We're doing it for the Lord, not doing it for ourselves. So you can find this way to be grateful that, all right, Lord, I guess this, whatever that thing might be, this movie or this song or this concert or this sermon or this book or this, whatever we've done. I mean, that's just the worlds that we live in. I don't want to exclude anybody who does anything. Everybody can be serving the Lord with what they do. That might be a fantastic architectural drawing you just came up with. You might have just plumbed the house in a way that's artistic and excellent.
Yes.
But I love, I think I might have said this at Worldview. I really have always loved Michelangelo, and for lots and lots of reasons, not that I'm a big historian, but, don't criticize, create, he said. And, if you've ever been to St. Peter's Basilica in the Vatican, and as you're walking in and you're surrounded by this giant circular circumference of statues in the air, and Michelangelo is the sculptor for many, if not all, of those statues. And, they're far away. They're kind of hard to see. And a few years ago, 20 years ago or something, they took these, I heard that they took these statues down for cleaning. And in discovering them, there's one that was in the back. And Michelangelo had considered it his finest work. And you can see this online. You can see a picture of this angel, and she's perfect. And he put it in a place where nobody can see it. And don't you think he's teaching us something?
Yeah.
Oh.
In that art, Michelangelo's good at that. So maybe the art, when we get a teeny bit of that inspiration, it can speak beyond ourselves to the kind of humility that the greatest master artist maybe of all time.
Yeah.
He was performing for God first and foremost, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh my goodness. You know what you are? You're a really good communicator.
Yeah.
I'm going to name that talent and gift for you as well.
And I'm going to name storyteller.
Yeah, storyteller, communicator.
Yeah.
It's really incredible. And we can see how God is using you as well and using those talents and gifts. It's really special. And I'm going to again, a little off script, but just thank you for that word that you gave us about praying before all of your endeavors. We pray before every podcast. We pray before every weekend of filming especially because we experience a ton of spiritual warfare the week before. It's every week before podcasting. We're prepared for it because we're prayerful about it. But, it just was a really, really good reminder that is a huge part of why God blesses this, is that we just lay it at his feet.
Yeah.
And so that just was a really encouraging
amen.
word to me. And so I wanted to thank you for that.
Well, we are so grateful for your time. Where can folks find you?
Yeah.
My
Not
website.
physically.
Not physically, yes.
Yeah, not
online.
geographically.
Sorry.
John Grooters, Grooters, johngrooters.com.
Okay.
Thankfully, my great team here put me a website. So a lot of the projects that we've done or are working on show up there. And then our company website is grooters.us. And you can sort of see a little bit about the company. So those are two great places.
Okay.
Amazing.
Well, so, I'm the one that does the research before the podcast. I was so incredibly impressed with both of your websites.
One of the first, she goes, Sarah, you have to see their website.
I know. Your team is, talk about excellence.
And I love that you have a team and you're not, don't get me wrong. If you're out there and you can hire freelancers, give people jobs. But I love that you have a team. That just seems so intentional. You want people who are going to collaborate together and their talents are going to play off of each other, strengths and weaknesses. And so I just think that that's excellent as well.
Yeah.
That's very cool.
Well, we'll definitely direct folks to your website.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much, and thank you for being generous with us today.
Yes.
This has been awesome. What a way to end the day, and we are so grateful for you and for your time. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you guys, and God bless you, and keep it up.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. Bye.
Bye. For more information on Project Brickworks, visit us online at projectbrickworks.org. Subscribe to our newsletter or text BRICK to 55498 to get the latest news and updates. We love y'all. Be blessed, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.